Hello and welcome to the Humble Baptist Podcast. I am your host, Troy, and I am the Humble Baptist. More than likely, if you're here, you already knew that. But we're going to go ahead and dive into tonight's episode, right? We're going to, no, we're not. Um, I have an announcement to make. Actually, I'm gonna wait till next week. Next week is gonna be announcement time because I am going to hopefully make a video, make a video that's gonna upload, and it will make my announcements. It's gonna be awesome. Gonna be glorious. Yeah, welcome to the Humble Baptist Podcast. If you are watching live, you have any questions, any comments, just say hi in the comments. Let me know you're here. Uh, Ask away. If you have questions and other people watch it, more than likely they have the same question. It's just part of how we interact, how we learn, grow. People are shy. No need to be shy here. All right. So we are going to start with a review of just some of the things that we've been learning that have brought us up to, I don't even know. What is this? This is episode 5. This is episode 5 of our How We Got the Bible series. So we started all the way with a little bit of Greek, learning it, and then talking about transmission, translation. But last week we learned about a world-changing invention, the invention of the Gutenberg movable type printing press. This thing completely changed the course of history. It made it to where your most likely your everyday people, right, getting your upper middle class could actually afford to own books, right? Books before the invention of the printing press, which was 1455, if you don't remember, um, really cost an arm and a leg. You have to think about it. If you wanted a Bible in the year 1400, what you had to do was pay someone 5 years worth of wages in order to copy the Bible, right? Page by page. They would sit there, they would copy it all out, and it would take around about 5 years. 5 years, they'll deliver you a Bible, but that's not only just the 5 years of their wages. You also gotta think a lot of these were printed on vellum, right? Which is leather that's been skinned real thin, right? So not only did you have to pay the guy for 5 years, but you also had to like murder an entire farm of goats or sheep or sometime even cows, right? Like you had to kill all of them, harvest the leather, tan it, scrape it, all that other stuff, and then pay a guy for 5 years to write on it, and then you would have your Bible. And all of that changed in 1455. We got the Gutenberg printing press, and it made books available. It made them to where, you know, you're, if you could afford a car nowadays, then you can actually afford a book. And world changing, world changing. So we looked at that, and then we also looked at we kind of got an introduction to Erasmus, who he was, why he was important, just kind of giving you the first thing of that he is the first printed and published Greek New Testament, right? And so it really, this thing takes off, right? His new instrument, he called it, right? He had a Latin on one side, Greek on the other. We got to look at a page of it, and it went everywhere. And so, yeah, we looked at him. We're gonna actually be looking at him again, but first we're gonna actually, let me pull up my thumbnail here for you guys. I just want to. There you go. And so this was our thumbnail for this week. If you think it's lame, don't worry, you're in good company. My son also thinks it's lame. He did help me design it, and so anyway, so we got 3 dudes on there, and it says, "Why are these guys important?" I'll go ahead and I'll give you the answer starting off before I even go into really who these guys are. Of course, if you watched last week's episode, you know the guy on the far left. Ooh, yep, that's backwards. on the far left, that way, that is Erasmus, Desiderius Erasmus. But who are these guys? Why are they important, right? Why do we care about them? Uh, if you've been keeping up, obviously we've been talking about printed editions of the Greek New Testament, right? Ever since the inventing of the Gutenberg printing press. Now we're in printed editions, not manuscripts, right? They're not handwritten anymore. Now we can make them in bulk, and it's a lot faster. And so it can really get out. Well, each one of these three guys has a printed Greek New Testament in the Reformation era, right? We're talking 1500s here, right? 1500s, early 1600s. And so what really what makes these guys important, especially for us as English speaking people, right? If you're because it does change based on your language that you're learning in, right? If this was a podcast done in Spanish, we would not be talking about the same list of people. We would be talking about Reina, and we would be talking about Valera. But as we are English and English speaking people, and that is mostly what we care about and study, these are our three guys that are important in the Greek New Testament uh, area. And so, why are they important? These are actually the giants. Whenever you think about this time period of who had a printed Greek New Testament, these are the three guys that you're gonna think of first. But what makes it even more special for us is that the King James translators used their printed Greek New Testaments whenever they were doing the New Testament for the King James Bible, right? Whenever we one of them is actually his New Testament is the basis for this one right here at the 1560 Geneva. But and so we can see the impact that they did, right, which dealt with the Greek language in our English Bibles. And so we're really starting that time period, right? Like our next episodes are going to be on English, right? We're going to go Wycliffe. We're going to talk about Tyndale. Uh, but now that we know why they're important for us, right? Why we care anything about them, we're gonna just go ahead and introduce them, right? You got Erasmus on the left, Desiderius Erasmus, born in 1466, dies 1536. He is the oldest of them. He would be what we would call a first generation reformer. You got Stephanus in the middle, right? He's going to be the next generation and pretty much be contemporary with Beza. That is the guy on the right, Theodore Beza. And so Erasmus on the left, Stephanus in the middle. He's also known as Robert Estienne. And then Theodore Beza on the right. And really, I don't have any fancy things to show you today. So we're just going to go ahead and go back to, yeah, y'all just kind of have to look at my ugly face. All right. So, 1 second while I get myself situated. Oh, look at that. Hey, I got Mason watching. Hey, Mason. Love you, buddy. That's my son. I'm glad you came in to join us. Um, so yeah, we're going to be talking about Stephanus. We're going to be talking about Erasmus, and we're going to be talking about Beza and just kind of the impact that they had. We're going to be talking about them and what they did as just kind of talking about who they were. And so we'll start with Erasmus since he is the first one. And Erasmus, right? Desiderius Erasmus, he came out with the first printed and published Greek New Testament. And so printed Greek New Testament. And that was in the year 1516. He was a Roman Catholic monk, right? He was a scholar. He kind of stuck to himself. We can see just the friendships that he had, right, through his writings and through his travels. He was friends with people like Thomas More. A lot of y'all won't know him. He was also a humanist scholar in England, right? Very close to King Henry VIII. And we actually see Erasmus debating Luther, Martin Luther, at several different times, like pretty much all throughout his life. And that's why we refer to him as a first generation reformer, because he's in the same time period as people like Martin Luther. He's in the same time period as people like Zwingli, King Henry VIII, right? This is kind of before some of your other big Reformation names like uh, Bucer or um, Melanchthon or John Calvin kind of come onto the scene, and him creating his first his first printed Greek New Testament really wasn't for the Greek aspect of it, right? Greek manuscripts kind of start making their way in somewhere around the time of 1450 to 1460, and he goes, and there's only one college that is teaching Greek. He goes to it and learns Greek, studies it, and has this new instrument printed with the Latin on one side, which is actually more or less what he cared about, and the Greek on the other. But now at this time, he kind of characterized a new movement, right? His saying was ad fontes, right? Back to the sources. And this was really something that kind of kicked off that that learning, right? That enlightenment era where people were starting to get out of the shell, right? Back then, I think most people didn't travel more than like 10 miles from their house. And so there was this time where everybody's starting to learn again. And so Erasmus kind of kicks that off, and we see that he has five different editions from 1516 to 1536, right? And there's little differences in between Erasmus's addiction. Oh, I love Pastor Claude. There's my pastor, everybody. You are wise. I'm thankful for you, brother. I am thankful for you, Pastor. I really am. You're a good brother, good friend, uh, good mentor. Love him. Um, and then Stephanus. Well, we're still we're still on Erasmus. Oh, I almost forgot. Not that guy. Not that guy. That is Beza. There you go. There's Erasmus for you. Um, so you can know who I'm talking about, because that picture does you a lot of good. Anyways, so we see him debating Luther. We see that the Reformation, the reformers really are waiting for him to come over and kind of join them, because he wasn't as Catholic as the Catholic wanted to be, but he wasn't as Protestant as the Protestants wanted him to be. He was an oddball, right? And another one of his books that a lot of literature nerds know about is The Praise of Folly. He writes this book that just talks about it's a what do they call it whenever they give personalities to inanimate objects? But he personifies folly and talks about it in that situation. But that kind of is going to lead us to our next guy, right? We're going to talk about Stephanus now, because we covered a lot about Erasmus last week. Stephanus is John Calvin's printer in Geneva. right? Now it's interesting that all of these people really did most of their work in Switzerland. Erasmus did it in Basel, Switzerland, and then you're going to see Stephanus and Beza actually operating out of Geneva, right? So unlike Erasmus, these guys are going to be reformed, right? They're going to be thoroughly Protestant, and they're going to be reformed completely, thoroughly through and through. And so Stephanus is actually John Calvin's printer. And you can see in this picture, if I could figure out how to make it bigger for you at some point, that is him messing with movable types, right? The typesetting for a printer. And so, but Stephanus comes out, he takes Erasmus's edition, right? He does his own textual criticism, right? So comparing manuscripts that he has and making slight changes to it and updates Erasmus's Textus Receptus. And so he kind of creates his own one, right? He made 4 editions from 1546 to 1551. And if if you're happy that we have chapters and verse divisions, right? Like whenever I say, John 3:16, you can grab a Bible off the shelf and turn right to it. If I say Hebrews 12:25, right, you can turn right to it, or Romans 8:18, we can open our Bibles and we can find it. Uh, Before Stephanus's 1550, that did not exist. Just straight up didn't exist. If we were talking about Romans, not only did you really only hear Romans being preached and that was it, but there was no identifying a section. I'd be like, turn to the book of Romans, about 2/3 through it, just kind of start reading, find out where you might be. And that this is after he's already talked about the fall of man. This is after he's already talked about just kind of skim through there, and eventually you'll find the verse. If I say John 3:16, you know exactly where to go. Can't go, oh, but it's in the very, very beginning of John. Just open up the book of John, turn a few pages. And so if you've been happy for verse numbers to help you find verses and chapters, you can thank Stephanus. If you've ever had a section where you're like, man, that is a really weird chapter division right there. Like that's in the middle of a sentence. It's a continuous thought. What happened? Then you can actually blame him, because he is the one that did that, and it's the same exact verse numbering that we have today. And so that takes us to our next person. Oh, Stephanus' other name, Robert Estienne. Stephanus was kind of like his trade name, kind of like an alias, but he really wasn't hiding. He just went by that, right? And so we'll go back to our next guy there. So remember, he is the printer for John Calvin at Geneva. Now we have Theodore Beza. Beza actually went to school with Calvin, and later on in life, Calvin brings him in to be the professor of Greek. And so he brings him in. He's going to be his university's Greek teacher. Eventually, Beza ends up being John Calvin's successor, right? When Calvin dies, Beza is brought in as essentially the leader of Geneva. And so this guy, he does 11 different editions of the TR. Starting from, let me look at my dates here, 1556 to 1604. His 1598 edition is the one that the King James translators really relied on the most. Whenever we read the King James, most of the times, if there's a variant, it's like, oh, I can't remember the exact number. I'll find it out whenever we get to the King James. But most of the time they go with Beza's reading. And so, we look at, of course, like 90% of it is the exact same, whether you're reading Erasmus, whether you're reading Stephanus, whether you're reading Beza. But if there's a variant, most of the time who they went with was Beza. And so Beza, he's born 1519, lives to 1605. So even 1 year before his death, he's still churning out Greek New Testaments. And so really this is kind of where the landscape, whenever people uh think about printed Greek New Testaments of the Reformation era, these are going to be the names that you hear, and it's mostly because that's what the King James translators really relied on for the New Testament. They also had the Latin Vulgate, but yeah, and so they used the 5 editions of Erasmus, the 4 of, Stephanus, and then they used I wanna say, if I'm remembering correctly, they only used really 2 of Beza's. A lot of Beza's different editions, really, they just came with different features, if that makes any sense. Like, this was one with annotations. This is one with, his manuscript listing in the column. It really wasn't, the method that they used really wasn't important to them. It really shows a different level of textual criticism than what we have today. Um, let me think here. I'm sorry. I'm thinking of the next. Huh, really, how do I word it? Bef- Before the printed Greek New Testaments, what you had was normally there was only a couple manuscripts involved, right? There may have been 2, there may have been 3, but normally there was no more than that. It would have been odd and weird to compare, right? Because you're saying, I'm starting with a good manuscript. I came all this way to copy it. And now what I've got to do is just copy it correctly. Whenever you get to where they're at, now they have a huge influx of Byzantine type manuscripts, right? And so they're looking at them, and they themselves are comparing the manuscripts together and choosing the readings based off of, at some point in time, hunches, in all honesty. Beza was really bad for that. Um, Beza did a lot of it's called conjectural emendations, and it's where he goes, I think this would be this way. Um, and really, it doesn't really change the meaning, but still, nonetheless, it was more theological versus more, let's compare the manuscripts as we have today. But nonetheless, before we get into that huge can of worms, uh yeah, we have Erasmus, Stephanus, and Beza, and they're all kind of building off of each other. Erasmus starts with the first one, and then Stephanus uses his as a base text, does his textual criticism on top of it, and then you have Beza that takes Stephanus's and kind of builds his textual criticism off of it. And there's some funny stories you can get into of both Stephanus and Beza using the same manuscript and picking different readings. It's funny. But yeah, that's really where we're going to be moving into. Now, our first guy in English, right? Because I'll give you a little high preview of next week. We're going to be starting with Wycliffe, and we're also probably going to be talking about Tyndale as well. Um, they predate these. And so you're going to be looking at, these are people that translating from the Latin, versus someone that is translating from the Greek. And yeah, but the impact that these three had is phenomenal. And so really, if there are any questions, go ahead and shoot them while I postpone and ramble. While I ramble on about something. But yeah, you have 2 people from Geneva and 1 person from Basel, Switzerland. Technically, he wasn't from Basel, Switzerland. He was from Rotterdam. Beza was French. I want to say Stephanus was French as well. But they, of course, moved to Geneva, and there's more resources to use, right? You got to go where the manuscripts are, right? You got to load up all your possessions and ride by horseback to the manuscripts. And that was just the time period that we're in, right? They couldn't do what we did in our first lesson or our second lesson where we're pulling manuscripts up on the computer. None of that existed. And so really the number of manuscripts that they use was significantly smaller than what we have to pull from today, right? Whenever Erasmus does his 12 to 14 is the general number that we kind of go from. And other than that, I'll be extraordinarily nice and say, up to 20 manuscripts just because we don't know. Even though he did start listing them out at one point, versus the 6,600 that we have today. But anyways, yeah, so that's what I've got for you tonight. Short live stream tonight. I am trying to keep these at a more digestible information, right? Because I throw so much out there in a short period of time that I really am looking for this to stick, right? So whenever we get into things like the later English translations, or we start talking about Westcott and Hort or Scrivener, you're going to need to have this as a base information to understand what this guy named Scrivener was even doing. And so, yeah, we'll just go ahead and end the podcast here, and we will see you guys next week. Hopefully, I will upload a special video. I'm doing fun things like trying to work on a better intro. That way, it's not as corny, cheesy. We're moving up. But I will see you guys next week.